Willmar, Minnesota is home to a rather large BNSF rail yard that is the junction for three major subdivisions. The Marshall subdivision will take trains south to Sioux City, Iowa. The Wayzata subdivision will take trains east to the Twin Cities and beyond, and the Morris subdivision splits off into smaller branch lines that serve South Dakota and other parts of Minnesota. I've been to Willmar Yard a couple times now, and I've also explored along the Marshall subdivision on several occasions. The problem is I've always done these things while in the middle of unrelated road trips, so I've never had the opportunity to really spend as much time as I want getting good shots. On the very last day of 2023, I got my opportunity. It didn't take me very long to find the first train, and it was quite the catch. Second in position is one of BNSF's finest SD70MACs. This was especially notable because it's the first BNSF MAC that I've ever filmed. On this particular section of track, the train was rolling along at 55 miles an hour, and I managed to get ahead of it in Cottonwood, Minnesota. The south end of town has an overpass, and I tell you, some rail fans live for these overhead shots. Unfortunately, the wind pretty much ruined the audio, but I still got a nice look at the train from above. Northeast of Hanley Falls is where I caught the train for a second time. The reason I pulled off at this particular spot was because there was an ethanol train on the siding waiting for the Mac and friends to pass. I've always spotted a train bridge on the north end of Clara City. Since today is the day of good shots, I went into town and got on the neighborhood side of the bridge. The scenery was very nice. Besides the SD70MAC, there are 4 other engines on the front. SD70 Ace number 9052 was leading the operation, and trailing the 2 EMDs were 2 -9s and a GEVO. Of course, there was also a GEVO pushing from the back. I went ahead one more time to see the consist as it entered the Willmar Y. While it may not be the size of the yard seen in Minneapolis, Willmar Yard is definitely nothing to sneeze at. I caught the Mac a fourth time from atop the pedestrian overpass just as it was porting in. As per usual, a yard job was taking place on the west end of the yard. The lead engine is a former Burlington Northern GP39-2. The second engine, number 2753, is a GP39E, which used to be a high-hood GP30 on the Southern Railroad, but later got rebuilt on the BN. They may have modernized the cab, but the GP30 body is unmistakable. Now the fun part is the area where they dump all the active locomotives waiting to be used. Last time I was here, I saw a fake bonnet -9, actually 2, as well as a few Heritage 1-9s. I didn't see any Santa Fe colors this time around, but there was some Cascade green. Now I won't go over every locomotive I saw, but there are a few to note. BNSF 112 is a former Santa Fe GP60M. EMD's 60 series was a response to the -8s, and so they're from about the same time period. They're also being phased out nowadays, but they don't seem to be as rare. I'm thinking this is because they were ordered in large numbers by both BN and SF. Either way, I always like seeing GP60Ms. I also found a good friend of BNSF 1458s, number 1462. This is an SD60M still wearing its white-nosed BN colors. It's been a yard regular since about 2020, running regional trains into northeastern South Dakota. There was yet another case of Cascade green further in the yard. 1687 has also been hanging around this part of Minnesota for many years, and as it turns out, this was the lead engine in a very early and low-quality video I took in Clara City back in 2022. This was during the very beginning of my interest in trains, and I was in one of those phases where I thought every engine was an SD40-2, and while in this particular case, I did happen to be correct. It wasn't until 3 months later in May of 2022 that I saw a GEVO for the first time, and had the massive advancement of realizing that GE locomotives exist. Also, I looked up 1545, and it used to be a GP9 for the Northern Pacific. It has since been rebuilt to a GP28P. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the -8. This thing was just sitting here, and the engine was even running. As I said before, this is the area where active locomotives are kept. It probably rolled into town recently and could be placed on another train at any time. I've wanted to see one of these B40-8Ws for a while now. There's only about 10 of them left or so on the system, and BNSF uses these things sparingly. They mostly get relegated to local and short regional jobs, while they slowly decrease in numbers. If you're watching this in early January of 2024 and want to see a 4-axle -8, Willmar, Minnesota is the place to be. I've actually been following the movement of these types of engines for a little while now over the last few months, and it seems that Minnesota in general is the place to be to see these B40-8Ws. After the excitement of Willmar Yard, it was time to go home. I caught 2 northbound trains on the way back. The first was a grainer powered by a single GEVO up front and 2 more GEs in the back. The second DPU is a plain old -9, but 5621 is actually an AC 4400 CW. I haven't caught very many of these in action on the BNSF, so it was neat to see. As for the second train, I'm back in Cottonwood on the same overpass. This final act is a mixed freight with 2 GEVOs on the front, and for the first time in this video, not a single DPU. Anyway, that's going to be it for this rather productive rail expedition, so I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.